Imagine for a second that you dig up a literal time capsule from nearly 3,000 years ago. You brush off the dirt, pop the heavy seal, and honestly, you're probably expecting to find a bunch of dusty relics, right? Maybe some archaic rules about ancient farming that have absolutely nothing to do with us today. But instead, you unroll this fragile piece of parchment, and it reads exactly like the push notifications you just got on your phone this morning.
And what's truly mind-blowing here is that these incredibly modern-sounding societal issues are actually the central themes of an ancient biblical text. Today we're diving into the Book of Micah, specifically focusing on chapters 1 through 3. Looking at these texts, it becomes super clear that human behavior hasn't changed one bit. I mean, this ancient text is literally a blueprint of our own modern societal dysfunction.
So, to really grasp the sheer weight of what's going on, we have to set the scene. Picture the ancient Middle East, around 750 to 680 BC. The place was a total powder keg. You've got this boiling geopolitical tension, with the Assyrian Empire acting as a massive, unstoppable military juggernaut, just swallowing up smaller nations left and right. And domestically, the wealth disparity is sprawling. Leaders, like the notoriously corrupt King Ahaz, weren't just making bad personal choices, they were actively fostering systemic exploitation and completely compromising the nation's moral integrity.
Now, where exactly does Micah fit into all of this chaos? It helps to contrast him with his famous contemporary, Isaiah. You see, Isaiah was an elite insider. He operated right in the capital city of Jerusalem, rubbing elbows with kings and court officials. Micah, on the other hand, was a rural outsider. He came from a working-class farming village called Moresheth. So he's essentially an ancient whistleblower, looking at a morally bankrupt system from the outside in. And let me tell you, he does not pull his punches.
Right out of the gate, Micah establishes these massive cosmic stakes. The text hits you with this visceral, terrifying imagery of a cosmic courtroom. God is depicted as descending to earth, and the impact is literally earth-shattering. Mountains are melting like wax before a fire. Valleys are splitting apart like water pouring down a steep cliff. He's using this language to announce a massive divine lawsuit against the entire nation.
But notice who the target is. This isn't just random chaotic wrath. It is aimed like a laser at the capital cities, Samaria in the north and Jerusalem in the south. Why target the capitals? Well, because they were the epicenters of influence. They were supposed to be these shining beacons of justice, but instead they'd been corrupted into literal headquarters of systemic theft. The elites inside these heavily fortified walls were orchestrating the rot from the top down. Samaria, for instance, is flat out prophesied to become a heap of ruins, just an empty, leveled plot for planting a vineyard.
And delivering this kind of message takes a massive toll. In chapter 1, Micah says he's going to go stripped and naked, wailing like jackals and mourning like ostriches. It sounds totally chaotic, maybe even completely unhinged to us today, right? But he's adopting the cultural language of the deepest possible grief. His empathy is so deep that it mirrors a modern whistleblower who is just crushed by the real human cost of a collapsing fraud. True prophets don't throw a party when the downfall comes. They carry the massive emotional burden of all those ruined lives. Which brilliantly illustrates how Micah channeled all that devastation into some incredibly dark, poetic irony. As the Assyrian army is approaching, Micah actually weaponizes the names of Judean towns against their delusional inhabitants. Shafir implies luxury and beauty, but Micah says they'll be led away in naked shame. Zanan literally means to march forth, but he predicts they're going to cower behind their walls, absolutely terrified to come out. He's using this biting, sarcastic irony to try and shake them awake from their delusion.
So what exactly triggered this total destruction? Chapter 2 points the finger directly at the wealthy and powerful class. Micah describes these elites lying awake in their beds at night, actively devising iniquity. They are literally losing sleep trying to figure out new ways to seize people's fields and houses, and the very second the sun comes up, they execute those schemes simply because it's in the power of their hand. Just imagine lying awake to plot someone else's ruin, just because you have the leverage to get away with it.
Let's break down the mechanics of this legalized theft, because it wasn't just guys mugging people in an alleyway. It was ancient institutional redlining. Here's their exact playbook. A vulnerable farmer has a bad harvest. The wealthy elites swoop right in and offer predatory loans. When the farmer inevitably defaults, the elites use complex legal loopholes to foreclose on the ancestral land, often forcing the whole family into debt slavery. Proving, unfortunately, that predatory lending isn't exactly a modern invention. This mirrors the insidious nature of our own subprime mortgages and hostile corporate takeovers perfectly.
And when Micah actually has the guts to call them out for this, how do these billionaires react? They try to shut him down. They command the true prophets to prattle not.
They are basically telling him to stay in his lane and stop disrupting the peace. These ancient elites wanted to comfortably maintain their cultural prestige as the House of Jacob and enjoy being called God's chosen people, all while treating their fellow citizens like absolute prey.
And that brings us to the ultimate poetic justice. You see, the land these elites were ruthlessly stealing wasn't just dirt. It was a sacred inheritance, distributed by lot under Joshua centuries earlier. Because they used the strict letter of the law to completely violate the spirit of the law, their judgment is total loss. The immense generational wealth these elites sacrificed their morals to steal will be violently stolen right back from them by foreign invaders. It's the inevitable consequence of building a completely extractive society.
But wait, it's not all doom and gloom. Even amid this heavy judgment, the text offers a really profound shift in tone right at the end of chapter 2. This beautiful counter-melody emerges. God promises to gather the remnant of Israel like sheep in a fold, led by a breaker and a future just king. It's pointing forward to a true shepherd, ultimately the Messiah, providing this stark, much-needed contrast to the predatory leaders of Micah's day.
Getting back to the immediate crisis, though, you might be wondering, where on earth was the justice system during all this theft? Well, Micah answers that in chapter 3 with a horrific, straight-up cannibalistic metaphor. He accuses the politicians and judges of stripping the skin off the people, breaking their bones, and chopping them to pieces like meat for a cooking pot. By taking bribes and heavily taxing the peasantry just to fund their own luxury, these leaders were quite literally consuming the working class. They viewed vulnerable people as nothing more than resources to be extracted.
And the spiritual leaders? Totally complicit. These ancient prophets for profits would happily chant peace and prosperity as long as they were getting paid generously by the elites, but the absolute second the funding stopped, they'd declare holy war. It's a chilling parallel to today's algorithm-driven echo chambers and pay-to-play media. Just like modern algorithms feed you comfortable narratives to maximize engagement, these ancient influencers traded hard truth for profit. They served up whatever made the billionaires comfortable. They were literally monetizing confirmation bias.
Because these influencers intentionally close their eyes to injustice just to make a quick buck, their punishment is psychological, absolute darkness. The text says the sun will go down on them, resulting in a complete loss of vision. It's a harsh reality. Because they refuse to see the truth when it mattered, they will have absolutely zero guidance to offer when a real crisis actually hits.
So how in the world did these politicians, judges, and priests sleep at night? Through a terrifying level of delusion. They actively leaned on the Lord, arrogantly saying, "Is not the Lord among us? No harm can come upon us?" They treated the monumental physical temple in Jerusalem like some kind of magical talisman that granted them total moral immunity. They genuinely thought they could act like monsters all week, just as long as they had the sacred buildings and religious heritage to fall back on.
History proves this definitely wasn't an empty threat. Let's look at how this builds to a devastating reality check. Micah completely shatters their delusion, declaring that because of their bloodshed, Zion will be plowed like a field. And history proves him right. In 722 BC, the Assyrian army brutally dismantled the supposedly untouchable city of Samaria. Then, in 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire burned Jerusalem to the ground and completely destroyed the temple. It proves unequivocally that true security is never ever found in monuments when a society is rotting from the inside out. Which brings us to a final, really provocative thought to ponder on your own. The ancient leaders falsely believed the physical presence of their temple shielded them from the consequences of their actions. So, what are our modern temples? In what ways do we falsely believe today that having advanced technology, massive economic wealth, or incredibly complex legal systems will grant our society immunity from the moral consequences of how we treat the vulnerable? It's a heavy question for sure, but as this explainer clearly shows, it's one we absolutely cannot afford to ignore.